Heard a lot of people asking for setup tutorials. We're getting a Dirt Latemodel right now at Volusia, and before I say anything more, I am not 100% sure on these adjustments, going off of real life statistics that I've learned, and I may be wrong on those too. So if I am, be kind, correct me, let's help each other out. So first off, tire pressures, kind of obvious. It shows you your inside of your tire, your middle, and your outside of your tire. I usually run the basic default iRacing setup tire pressure, but I always seem to lower the left rear down to 8. This promotes more heat in the left rear to help equal out what the right rear is. Your setup depends on how it's driving, so if you're free, loose, spinning the tires, your right rear is going to be hotter than your left rear just because it's a bigger tire also with the stagger. And you can kind of run 15-20 laps, come back, check your tire temperatures. If they're pretty close to the same, then you know your car is nice and neutral. Really don't want to tweak on it too much after that. You just want to adjust your line on the track and make sure you're running the correct line. iRacing does have a little tip on if you hold your mouse over the arrows, it tells you what the adjustment will do. Obviously, your front tire is bigger than your left tire at 1 inch. So it's a 90-inch tire on the right front, it's an 89-inch tire on the left front. Same for the rear. More stagger is going to help you turn the car on throttle, and it's going to want to keep turning the car. So if you're tight on the straightaway, you may increase that stagger amount. It does help on entry too. If you're too loose, then you can try backing that down. And again, looking at your tire temperatures, that'll tell you what your car is doing. So we're going to get into toe in. Typically we run to a quarter to a half inch of toe out. It's going to be a negative number. This helps the car through bumps and suspension travel. If you're towed in, you're going to get a real darty car. It's going to be hard to steer. It's going to want to jump around on the straightaways. If you're towing out, it should be a little more stable for you. Steering ratio is how fast you get from full lock to full lock. Typical dirt cars around maybe 1 turn to 3/4 turn full lock to lock. I think it's like 6-to-1 ratio. This one goes to 8-to-1. I know modifieds go 6-to-1. Steering offset, what's that do? Well, that is when your car's going down the straightaway, it's kind of yawed out, which means to slide. It almost feels like it's sliding. So if you feel like you're sliding, you can go negative on this number, and that'll help you get rid of that feeling. The car will still have the attitude of it kind of looking like it's turning, but a natural 4-bar car kind of does dog track or crab leg down the straightaways because of the rear steer. So if you're having problems with that, try going negative. If you want to go the other way, you can. Brake pressure. I usually don't run a right front brake just because that's my style. Typically, with no right front brake, you want to run a higher number, which is going to help keep the car stable with no right front brake, because when you do apply the brake, it's going to jump to the left really quick. So by yourself, you can control that. You can control how quick the car jumps to the left or whatnot. But once you get in traffic, you might not like that, and you might want to go back to all-wheel brake. But if you go to all-wheel brake, you're going to want to run a lower brake pressure number to keep more rear brake. Typical dirt car, I would say, is close to 60% rear, 40% front. And that's what we're at right here, is 40% front brake. We're going to get down to spring perches. So spring perch is basically a screw jack or weight jacker, or I don't know another term for it. But going to the left on this is going to increase your ride height. So on a dirt car, we typically run around 150 to 200 pounds of bite. Might be a little high. I know on my late model I'm running right around 150, but the game seems to like a little more bite than real life just because of the surface and how smooth it is. it can get away with that. Real life, you're probably going to hit some more bumps. You're going to see more areas of the track like this, to where if you're a real high wedge or bite, the car is going to want to jump out from underneath you and get tight. So you kind of got to back it down. So with that being said, if you're too loose, you're going to want to basically do a round of turns of bite. So what we're going to do by a round, so we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, down on the right front, up on the left front 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, up on the left rear 1, 2, 3, 4, down on the right rear 1, 2, 3, 4. So we went from 200 and some pounds of bite to 250. So one whole turn of bite in the car is 50 pounds of left rear bite. What left rear bite is the difference between the left rear weight on the scale and the right rear weight on the scale. That's how you get your bite number. So basically now we've talked you through that. If you're too tight, then do around the opposite way. And what that does is it keeps the whole car level to where your ride heights are. Typically a dirt car is raked more on the left than the right to give it attitude. It helps the roll center of the car get on the right side than the corner. Springs, basically, they're going to be the same as any other race car, what a spring does for an oval track car. The only big difference with a dirt car is the left rear spring. Since we're on the bars, there's a lot of bar angle in the car, you're on the bars when you pick up the gas, this lower spring number is going to help that car pop up on the bars and steer for you than a stiffer spring. Well, you're going to say, well, how's that? When you put a 250 pound spring in, all of a sudden you got almost 100 pounds more bite. Sure, you do, but that stiffer spring doesn't have as much energy to pop back out and get the car up on the bars as a 150 pound spring. So if you're going in the corner and you pick up the gas and it feels like the rear end's acting slow, might be too stiff on the spring, you can go back down. I've been running it down around 150 at most tracks. I seem to like that feel. The right rear spring, same as any other oval track racing. The bigger the spring, the tighter you are at entry, but the looser you are on throttle. Same with the right front. We're going to get into talking about these packers. Well, what's a packer? Well, it's an actual bump stop. I don't know where the term packer came from. Maybe that's the correct term, and I'm just been used to bump stop. But in dirt track racing, we call it bump stop. So, what does a bump stop do? So, what a bump stop does is if you take a look at your ride height, at static ride height, when your car is sitting there, you're at 4 1/4 inches. So you can't really measure your shock right now, but let's say your shock is 5.5 inches, well, 12.5 inches, rod end to rod end, center to center. So when the car goes in the corner and it goes down to 8 inches, you're just about into this bump stop. If it goes to 8.5, you're probably in this bump stop. And then it's going to stop rotating there, and it's just going to ride on that bump stop. I like the bump stop. I've always ran a bump stop in my cars, and it just makes it car feel like when you go in the corner, it sets down on it, and it gets on the right front really good, but then it starts to push back on the left rear a little bit. And when you run a bump stop, you want to run a low bump valving and a high rebound setting. So what's that mean? Well, the bump means I can push the shock in really easy, but when I go to pull the shock back out, it's going to fight. It's not going to want to come out real good. So that's going to hold it on that bump stop. Don't really need one in the left front. I haven't really seen the game really react too much to that number. And then your shock valving on the left front is going to be the same as any other oval racing. Pretty much left rear, same thing. And we're going to increase the valving to keep the car up on the bars, and I run around like a 5 or a 4 rebound to just so it doesn't snap the left rear underneath you when you pick up the gas, and it kind of just rolls into it. You don't want to shock the rear end when you pick up the gas. You just want to ease into it and let that rear end drive underneath you and help you turn. Your bar angles, your upper trailing arm, and on both sides. In real life, the flatter your bars are on the right side, the tighter you are going to be on entry and exit, the more drive you're going to drive the right rear. And then the left side, the more angle you get, the quicker the car is going to be up on the bars and digging on the left rear. So fuel, we're going to basically run 9 to 10, maybe 12 gallons at some bigger tracks where you're wide open a lot. Ballast, I've been running it way back. I believe this is back. I'm not sure, it doesn't really make sense, the bottom line, but I think that's back. The farther back you get your weight, it's going to free you up once you rotate into the corner. Off throttle, it's going to want to keep the rear end swinging around, but on throttle, it's going to snap you straight. It's going to want to drive the rear tires and launch you forward coming out of the corner. So that's why I've been running it there. Rear weight shows you how much percent on the rear tires. Your cross is kind of a number of your bite in a way. Your J-bar height. I've been running about 5 inches of rake. Real life, I think we were right around 8, but it seems like the more I rake the J-bar in these cars, the less feel I get of the car being hooked up in the track. It feels like it snaps it loose more. And it says also on the bottom that if you run less rake, you're going to get more forward drive. So that's one thing to keep in mind too. If you're having trouble getting off the corner, you might have too much rake and your car's rolling on the right sides too hard and it's wanting to rotate and keep going left. You can keep an eye on that. Another thing is deck height. You might be hearing some word about late models having a deck height rule or a drop rule or droop rule they call it. So you're going to want to have your deck as high as you can. Well, why? Why do you want it as high as you can? Well, you want it as high as you can because you got a freaking spoiler in the air and it's pushing down on the back end. It's creating downforce. So the higher you get that spoiler in the air, the more downforce you're getting on the rear end, the more traction you're going to generate. If you're a little free, you might be wanting to raise your ride heights up in the back to get that spoiler in the air, or if you're a little tight, you might want to drop it down a little bit to get it out of the air so it frees you up a little bit. Your axle lead. Axle lead is your left rear, difference in your left rear to your right rear. So I'm going to get out of the car here and try and find a good picture to look at. Don't know if I can make this one work. So basically right now you're at zero rear steer with the garage being set at what it is. Well, I actually got 1/16 leading the left rear. So rear steer. Let's say your car is 110-inch wheelbase on the right and 110-inch wheelbase on the left. That means you have 0 rear steer. Both your rear tires are exactly the same front to back, from the front of the car to the back of the car. When you start taking this number into the negative, you're starting to walk that left rear tire farther ahead than the right rear tire. Well, what does that do? Well, it's going to help the car turn. When you go in the corner off the gas with the left rear leading, or on the gas, it's going to make that rear end turn the car to the left. Basically, if you go positive with it, you're going to be having a loose car. You're going to want to tighten it up by doing that. If you're tight, then you want to go negative with your rear steer. Try going a little bit at a time. If you go from one to the other just to feel the difference, like a +4 to a -4, you can do that. But as far as tuning your car, if you feel like you're doing pretty good, I would just go 1 or 2 clicks at a time. I've tried running 0 and the car just feels too tight on the straightaway and I can't get it into the turn. And so I've been running around -2. And another thing is, when these things are red, going up will be to the left and going down will be to the right. So if you're like -7, you're going to want to click the left arrow. If you're +7, you want to click the right arrow. And rear steer, really, you don't want to run too much, but you don't want to run, you want to run a little, because if you got the car working really good, when you pick up the gas, you need the rear end to kind of help the front end too. So that's what axle lead is. It's basically rear steer. Final drive ratio, it's kind of self-explanatory. Driver preference. I've had the best luck with the car just tapping the chip a little bit going in the corner. It seems like a really good gear for the starts. You get a good start. You're not lagging and putting on the start. If you run a lower gear, like a 494 here, you're going to have a little better success keeping the car hooked up. But if you have a restart, you're really going to have trouble on the restarts. And I've noticed that myself, where I feel like the car's faster with a deeper gear and carry more speed on the straightaway than a shorter gear to get you out of the corner. But let's take a few laps and explain how you need to be driving these cars. So with the setup I have, which everybody will have now because I'm making a video, this track is 100% used up. The line is really black, so you're going to want to keep the car nice and straight on entry, because if you get it too sideways, then you're breaking traction. You can never really get that traction back. So that's what it's going to look like. Nice and easy on the throttle, keeping it as straight as possible. You're going to wait to get on the gas, and you can see your tracker just increase as you keep the car straighter and keep the momentum rolling. So now my ghost car is going to be behind me because I'm gaining time keeping it straight and easy on the throttle. Most guys will want to throw the car in the corner. It's a dirt car, let's get sideways. Yeah, on a tacky track you can get away with that, but when the track starts to get this black line, you really got to keep them straight and keep the car from spinning the tires. If you come in the corner, you can see how my ghost car just goes away. Small sideways, on the gas, look at it just drive away from it. I mean, that's what I see a lot of racing online. People struggle with this. Just way too much throttle. They don't need it. It sounds like you're going fast, but you're not. You hear the car bog once the tires do hook up. So you really, really, really want to keep the car nice and straight. You can get chassis roll with having a stiffer setup or whatever, because traction creates the roll. If you're trying to make the car roll too much on the springs and shocks, with the springs and shocks, then you might want to start going the other way, and you'll see your lap times pick up. Because if you're getting the car to pivot too much on the right rear with too much J-bar angle, or dig off the right rear too much with too much J-bar angle, or whatever you're doing to the setup, you'll be able to see it. So just a few laps there, I'm almost 170 degrees on the left rear, 173 on the right rear, so I'm right around where I want it to be for setup as far as this track condition goes. And it may change the longer you run, the more fuel you're going to burn, so you might get tighter. So that's another thing to keep in mind too, is if your car gets a little too tight during the end of the race, you can try running a little more fuel at the beginning so it levels it off more at the end. If I missed anything, let me know. I'll try and answer your questions on the forum. If I got anything wrong, don't beat me up too bad about it, because nobody else is really trying to help anybody else. So let's work together and make this fun for everyone. It's not fun running 3/4 to a second slower than the fast guy, because everybody's just all about winning, you know. So I hope it helps. Just try and be smooth is the biggest thing. I mean, I've learned that even with the rally cars, the base setup's pretty good, just a couple small tweaks, and it's really not too bad. But maybe just running a few laps where you're just nice and straight and gaining on your time lap after lap after lap, and learning what the maximum limit to push the car into the corner and when to pick up the throttle. Like, I'm barely even going fast, and I'm pretty much keeping up with my ghost car pretty well. So it's just a trial and error. I hope these setup adjustments and tips help you guys. If not, I wasted 20 minutes. So I'll see you on the track.